All right, guys, we are here with the KO King. How you doing today, Russ?
Good, how are you?
The Global Guru, Zach. And, of course, Dr. J. Esquire. Thank you for doing the extended rules section today.
Always happy.
So if you guys haven't seen the rules section, we actually broke it out into two parts. We have the first part that shows you how to play the main game with the base characters, and then we also did an additional video that actually talks about the expansion characters that are in the Riverfolk expansion. So check out those videos if you guys are listening to us and going, what are you guys talking about?
Right.
That will explain it. And this is the game. So this is the playthrough, and we are talking about the game that I swear in our group more people owned on like release week than we have seen in any of our other ones.
There were 5 copies between 3 of us, weren't there?
And probably I would say one of the most confusing first times we played around, because this is the definition of an asymmetric game. So we're talking about Root, a game of woodland might and right. So if you guys didn't hear, asymmetric means that every single character, so every player in this game, uses almost entirely different mechanics.
Yeah,
to
so
run into.
It's a totally different game for every character in this game.
Yeah, like we talked in the rule, the how to play, the way that each faction wins is get to 30 points.
That's like the only common thing.
That's the only thing they have in common. Everything else is completely different, and it's just, it can be really overwhelming the first time you play it, and the second time, and the third time.
Yeah, so what were your guys' impressions the first time we played this? Because I know I didn't know what we were playing when I showed up, because I showed up late. I'm like, okay, let's do this. I guess I'm playing some Trash Panda, but...
I remember the first time we played, I played the Birds, the Dynasty, and I mean, I won, but I remember thinking at the end, like, I have no idea what I just did. Like, I didn't know what the other players did, and my head, I was like, and at that point, I didn't own it, and I was thinking, it was okay, and then I was able to pick it up, and I was like, all right, I'm gonna pick it up.
But by the end of the game, you could kind of know how to play your character.
Yeah,
right?
and
know your character.
Yeah, the one you were playing
not everyone.
Yeah, the one you were playing was the one that you kind of program the steps as you go through, right?
Yeah, and I remember being done, and Zach was playing the little mice, and I was like, I have no idea what you did in that entire game.
I didn't know what I was doing for most of the game, but by the end, I got it, and then we played a second time, and I won with them. So yeah, we've played a bunch of different games a bunch of different times. So your guys' first game I didn't play in. The first game that I played, we played with the expansion races, and I played as the Riverfolk Company, which don't do that on your first time playing the game. Because the expansion races, you have to know what everyone else is doing, and everyone kind of has to know what you're doing in order to really be effective. And so it's really important that you know what all the other factions do before throwing in the. But didn't you win with that?
I didn't the first time we won. No.
Well, all the races, if you were interested, on the back tell you their difficulty, which is really important.
Yeah. And then like I would also recommend for the Vagabond too, is that one. I think you could do it the first time, but you have to pay attention like to everybody's turn, because the way he runs, you got to know what everybody else is doing. Kind of like the Riverfolk, except if you don't know what everybody else is doing, it's so much harder to plan your moves, because since the crafting items are what set how many things you can do per turn. If you're not trying to get those early, or if you're not trying to go to the people who are crafting those items, you're going to get maybe 1 or 2 actions a turn while everybody else gets like 5 or 6.
See, and that was another thing that was interesting. The first few times we played the game, we didn't craft like at all.
Yeah, thanks a lot, guys.
He played, Kevin's playing the Vagabond, and he's just like, I can't get any of these items because other players have to craft these items in order for Kevin to be able to get them.
Well, and it wasn't just that. It was crafting abilities. Like, you can craft abilities, but I was so focused on
we're just
trying to
learning
figure out
what we're doing.
The lizard
It's like,
did.
whoa, we're not doing that.
And then I crafted an ability that allowed it to attack, which the lizards have to
it's hard for them to
use
attack.
acolytes to attack without. But then when I was able to attack it at I think it was a bird song, it was like totally different. So I was crafting really altered the game.
Yeah.
Well, it seems like the more you play it, the more you kind of expand the strategy. So you realize that, hey, I need to work with this person, or I need to make sure I craft items, because there's a lot of synergy. And it seems like if someone maybe doesn't do what they're supposed to be doing, it's going to make someone else better. Whereas if everyone's doing what they're supposed to be doing, it kind of balances everything.
Out.
So the game that I won as the river folk, they're actually really good at, they can be really good at crafting depending on how you play them. And so the more of these trade posts that you build, the more you can craft. And what the vagabond can do is he can give cards to the other factions in order to get points. And since the river folks are all public, Kevin's like, I'm gonna give all these cards to Jared, and he's just gonna end up selling them. And so he got a bunch of points, and then it was my turn, and I was like, well, I'm gonna craft all these cards you gave me.
To town.
And I went to town, and I got like 12 points in one turn, and Russ was like, super salty. It was great.
Yeah, if you had, and by the way, you guys can watch that live, twitch.tv/.
Oh, that's right. We did.
It is in the clips.
You can guys live play that one.
You can go see. You can go see the playthrough of that for that one. But yeah, if you hadn't done that, the next round I totally would have won.
The next round, everyone would have won. Like it was that close of a game where everyone's like, "Oh, I would not have gotten another turn for sure if I hadn't won that."
So I will say, this game, the first time you play it, do yourself a favor and just play it to learn. If you play it to try to win, it's going to be frustrating.
Yeah,
I mean, and it's not just the first time. It's just
a couple times.
There's just a lot to take in. And, if you're trying the river folk and no one's trading with you, well, players aren't, kind of making the game work like it's supposed to work.
Yeah. This is definitely one of those games where you can't make your decision on it after the first playthrough.
Absolutely.
And FYI for you guys, our general policy is when we actually do these videos, we try to get at least two or three.
Yeah,
how many times have you played this already?
I actually looked. I played it
5 times.
I actually looked. I've played it 9 times if you include my solo plays, which kind of surprised me because I don't play a lot of solo games. So this is a great game solo. And I will say that if you play solo, I know a lot of people talk about how difficult it is. It's a completely different game. So you can't have the same strategy, at least if you play with like the lizard cult against the marquee cat, because no one's going to come out and take out your gardens like they do in a if you're playing against players.
Your opponent's moves are more mechanical, right?
Right. So you have to approach it with a whole different strategy, which is a lot of fun. And like I said, it's a pretty quick.
What would you say is your
setup.
Optimal players? Solo, 2, 3, 4?
I really
6.
enjoyed it, like 5 and 6.
I do too. I totally
I mean, there's a lot going on, but
although I noticed, so I was the cat when we played 6, and I'm pretty sure the rules said that they're not recommended for a big game like that, and I could tell. I felt like I was at a disadvantage because your advantage
you're already
is that
everywhere.
You're already everywhere, but with so many people, you get wiped out, and it's really hard to recover. So I was a bit behind, and it was still fun, but I think there's a reason why they've recommended that it's not quite as balanced.
Yeah,
and I want to play it cooperative. You can actually play it co-op too,
teams type of thing.
So before
co-op like solo,
working together
with like 2 or 3 people against the mechanical cat.
Yeah. So before we kind of go in, so with the co-op and the solo play, we didn't really kind of cover on the how to play to do that. Can you explain a little bit, Russ, how it works in terms of that?
You set the cats up like you would normally, and the basics of the game is you flip, and then what card you flip over will dictate where you put new cats. If cats have more than 3, then they spread, and anywhere that there is a cat and your character, they will automatically battle. So it's more of a
pandemic.
That kind of
outbursts. Outbreaks.
Yeah, so you kind of got to balance things. You've got to worry about how you score because the cats will score really fast. They hit in chunks. About turn 3 or 4, they usually start chunking points. So you've got to set up and kind of be aggressive on your point getting. It's different strategy because as we've played Root, we know what tends to happen is a lot of like tear down. As soon as someone gets a lead, it's like we can't let that person get
everyone focuses
right.
on
So
that person,
With
the
solo,
mechanical, you don't have to worry about that. So like with the Lizard Colt, you can get a bunch of gardens out and not have to worry about everyone coming and taking your gardens right away. You set them up where you can set them up, and then you churn points. Birds is kind of the same way. You got to play aggressive and
it's almost like a countdown timer, right? When you're playing on a solo.
Yeah, because they will start to, if you don't keep them under control, like you'll just look at the score, you'll be like, I'm dead.
Yep. So Jared, we always like to kind of get your overall view of the rule book. How do you feel about this one?
I didn't feel that great about it at first, and mostly because there's like 3 different kind of rule books that come with it. There's a how to play for the regular game, and then there's the law of Root, which is really like the in-depth rules, and then there's a how to play or like a learn to play for the expansion races. And so everything kind of felt like it was bouncing around, but actually looking at the rule book a little bit more today before doing our how to play video, I actually realized that there was a lot in there that I hadn't noticed before. And big part of that is because when I learned the game, you guys taught me the game, and I didn't have to sit there and read the rule book.
So it's our fault.
It's absolutely all your fault.
Great. Yeah, thanks.
It's completely your guys' fault.
Whatever.
But it's actually really good. I wish it had an index. Like every rule book needs an index if it's more than 6 or 7 pages long.
This seems like there was a lot where there was a lot of interactions that we were looking for, and they were harder to find. It's like, well, when this one, we have a question where this one meets with this one. What happened? Where do we even look?
Yeah, because the way the rule book is laid out is it goes with the general rules, kind of like how we did our video, but then it goes into specific races for them.
By the way,
might I add the Vagabond one is the longest out of everyone? It's like everybody gets like 2 columns, and the Vagabond gets like 2 pages.
I feel like the game, once you get it, isn't as complicated with a lot of those interactions, but man, it takes time getting there. And I will also say one point for me for the rule book, I love the back. It tells you based on players what are optimal characters to play.
Yeah.
So whether you're playing solo, it tells you, what are good matches. So because it's so asymmetrical, they've taken the time to balance out. Hey, if you're playing with 5 players, these are the best characters.
One of the things that the rule book does that I like, and also has its own issues, is whenever it explains a rule, if there's an exception to the rule, it will put a little picture of like a cat next to it or a little lizard next to it, so that there's an exception to that rule that deals with that faction. I wish it had like a page reference. There's like, if the lizard folk don't do this, go find it here.
Yeah, but I just think of how daunting it would be to develop this game or write a rule book.
No,
to
make it balanced.
For sure.
This would be one of those rule books that I kind of would, and I don't know because I haven't looked, is if they have a digital version of it where you can click links on it where it'll take you to different sections.
That would actually be really good, like a really good thing to do. Aside from all of that, the rule book is really probably like the Law of Root rule book is probably like an 8 out of 10 for me. The Learn to Play guide I don't like.
Is that the one where it gives you specific
it tells
steps?
You do this, then you do this, then you do this.
I didn't like that. We tried to play that our first
Yeah.
game, and that might have added some of our confusion.
It was super confusing.
Because the way we learn, at least myself, and I think Zach is into this boat when we were that night, is I want to know why I'm doing something, and when it just tells me exactly what move to do, there's no thought behind it.
Yeah.
So I remember doing that, and I'm like, and I still don't know how to play.
Which I should warn you guys, because I don't think they're as clear about it as in that how to play, is that they have scripted every single move down to your dice rolls, where when it says roll your dice, don't roll your dice. Actually, just keep reading on, and it will tell you which faces to turn your dice to. And once I realized that portion of the how to play actually made a little bit more sense to me, because I'm like, oh, they're forcing us to do these so they can actually show us those without us,
Yeah,
trying to do
I
it.
get it.
Right.
I just don't learn that way, and so
I think you could
was a
if there
nice
was
idea.
a deeper explanation about what was going on and why you were doing things. But if you're just like, okay, play this card and then move the birds from here to there, why? Why did I do that? You need a little bit more explanation. Because you placed the card on the move thing, you would then move from here to there for this reason.
Yeah.
So
oddly enough, the thing that helped me understand this game, like really get me to where I love it, is the theme and thinking about all the different factions doing what they're supposed to do, as opposed to thinking of it as like a game, if that makes sense.
So one of the things that I really like about this game is it comes across as an uber cutesy little game, and there's some dark undertones in the whole game. Like this isn't a bunch of like little woodland creatures who are pecking at each other and trying to like squirrels chittering at each other. They're like killing each other, and it really hit home when I'm like, the otters are war profiteers. They are just there to make money from the prolonged conflict. Like they
you
are
could totally
there.
retheme this with like mafia.
Yeah.
and like
You could
gangsters
absolutely
and-
retheme this with a very serious,
dark-
bloody, dark
Yeah.
theme.
Like there is a vagabond that can just go into a section and pretty much drop an atomic bomb and kill everybody in that section, and you can't even go down
the
there.
vagabond's an instigator. Like he'll pit people against each other for his own benefit.
And it comes across in the gameplay. I don't think we've really played where someone wasn't even a little bit salty.
Yeah, this is the funny. this is the funny thing. We like, as you guys can tell, we love this game.
But we
even-
like that. We
even
like when it
talking
brings
about
out
we're
emotion.
like, come on, like even
I
talking
love this
about it.
game, but I have never. Me and Russ have never hated each other more than when we have played this game, and not just like the one time that happened. It's like 2 or 3 times in a row we like get very hot headed.
This is the problem.
score track
that's
down
the
there
problem. The score track is the problem.
causes
see what's
me
coming.
so much stress in this game because of how you score. The lizard folk.
Russ
way
doesn't
I
play
want
the lizard folk right. I'm convinced he doesn't play them right.
We can figure that out.
It doesn't. It doesn't matter if you're
so-
28. If anyone is over 20, they have the chance to win.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
but
and you
see,
have to.
So here's
it
the
makes
thing,
you
though,
stressed out.
is if you score a little bit at a time, then you kind of miss your chance. At least the way I like to play the lizard folk, there's going to be somewhere in the first, and this game really is weird because it doesn't seem like there's a ton of turns when you really break it down.
Yeah.
It's like somewhere in there, turn 3 or 4, you're going to have a chance to like blindside everybody for 10 to 12 points.
Yep.
But if you do that,
You're done.
the last points you get are gonna you have to scrape to get. So
everyone's
it's
after you.
Because this target has just
game
been
we've
drawn.
played with Russ that he's played the lizard folk. He'll be like, okay, I'm going to put these cards down. He reveals like 4 cards and he goes up 12 or 13 points. And it's just like that's what triggers me every time.
Yeah.
I'm just like, what? How do we even stop that from happening? And you just lose your mind. And then all of a sudden, he's got 4 gardens out
Right.
there, and before it's his turn again, he's got none. He's got no he's got no warriors left on the board.
so
He's
then it comes
not even
down
in
to
the
trying
game.
to craft a little bit here or
Yep.
there, and it's really hard to score points. And so last time we went in, I had a different approach. I was not gonna do that, but on turn, I think it was turn 2 or 3. The problem was
Old
is that
habits die
everybody.
hard.
So one of the players flipped over a domination card, which we haven't talked about, that can totally alter the win condition of
For
the
that
game.
player, yeah.
For that player. So they flipped over a domination card. So all of a sudden, this player had massive target on his back, and there was all this space that I could put gardens, and it was like, so I had to score. Like I didn't have a choice. I went to get.
Sure.
Well, here's the thing, though.
He
But what I
jumped
knew,
up like 10 or 12, and it was the saltiest game we've ever played.
but because I did that, you guys couldn't worry about my gardens because that player had their domination card. So I knew I was safe. And
This game is all about timing, because if you can time that
Timing
right,
is
where
huge.
someone's doing something, you sneak through get all your points at the right time. Like ideally, you get those big swing 10, 12 points at the very end to win it. That's how I won with the Woodland Alliance. You're getting all these little points. You think you're behind, and then boom,
you snowball.
You can snowball.
And that's where the salt comes. But that's kind of matches the theme of the game, right?
Because you don't see it coming.
One of the factions will get just like when you won with the River Folk, you just traded like. Oh, that made me so sad. I was like, "What is going on?"
We kind of had an idea because they had a good synergy going.
But see, I play. Jared laughs, but I play where I give the River Folk.
He does.
He's got because
like the lizards have more meeples than anyone else, and that's because they're supposed to go out on the board and then supposed to go into your acolytes. He's got like 2 acolytes the whole game, and he's giving me gobs and gobs of them.
When
and
I
I'm
put
like,
my guys out, nobody attacks them. I can't get acolytes unless I use you, so I end up using your guys as guys to kill others and take over property.
It was working. You were doing well.
How the lizard folk are supposed to be played is you put down a garden, and then you put a bunch of guys to defend it. Then you go and you build another garden. You put a bunch of guys down to defend it. You start getting some small points, and then they have to come in and kill your guys in order to get to your gardens. That's how you're supposed to play. But instead, what Russ does is he just buys victory points by handing me gobs of meeples. Doesn't bother putting them on the board. Doesn't bother spending them as acolytes, and then he's just like, I'll just slap these cards down and win the game.
Even when you said, I will not give you any more, the next turn you gave him. And
it's because the lizard folk, like, if they have a hand of the same card, they have a potential to score a ton of points. So he had like 5 foxes or something because he bought a bunch off of me. And I had all these meeples, and I'm like, it doesn't matter. I maxed out how much I charged him for it.
Actually, these 2 factions,
nothing.
I think these 2 factions end up causing the salt more than because what happens is
that costs more than
I give
anything.
you the characters, so I buy your mercenaries.
Yeah.
Your mercenaries allow me to put a garden down.
Yep.
And then I, can go that way. So it's like you can't stop it, but it's giving me the win, but it's helping you. It's just it's so fun that way. And that's
those are the 2 expansion races, and that's why I said it's so important that you play with experienced players when you play with the expansion races, because the river folk get creamed if the other players don't know how to buy from them and don't know when to buy from them.
It's the same with the Vagabond. If no one's crafting, the Vagabond is...
You get
because they have to
3 actions tops.
But you've got to be able to use the Vagabond for your favorite. Like, you've got to get the Vagabond involved.
I just want to be everybody's friends. Like Jared and I, we were talking. The Vagabonds are the YouTubers of Root. We just want to be famous, and
that's all the Vagabonds have to do is be famous. And like the first time I played, and you were playing as the Vagabond, you're like, okay, I'm gonna go in here into the woods, and I was like, what? You did what? You could do that?
I just
what does that even mean?
I just ignored half the players when I first started this game.
And then he's like handing people cards. And I'm like, will you just give people cards? And that sentence is said more than any other sentence in this game. If you don't understand the other faction, he's like, you just get to do X. You just get to do that.
When players at first, when the first times we played, I can't count how many times someone would get scored. But how did you score? Wait, what? Yeah. What did you do?
The first time we played with Russ, I was like, how do you get points? He was like, my gardens. I was like, no. How do you get points? And he's like, well, I do this. I was like, no. How do you get points? And then finally he broke down. He told me how I got points. I was like, oh, so to stop you, I have to do this. And he's like, yes. Didn't want to tell me. And that's another huge thing about the game is you need to know how to stop the other players from scoring points. The lizard folk, you kill their gardens. The river folk come, you have to destroy their trade posts. You have to destroy the bases of the Woodland Alliance and the roosts on these guys. But if you don't even know how your own faction works, or you're still learning, like you're not going to know that.
Yeah. So this is a kind of game that I think really will you as a player decide if you are more interested in mastering games or discovering games.
Yeah.
This game is a ton of discovery. 4, 5, 6 plays into it. Much more mastery post that. You're not going to have, games will be very interesting based on what factions you are and how people play the factions. Because the way I play factions, I think is different than other people's play factions. When I see someone play the birds, I'm always like, that's not how to do it. We've got the river folks. The river folks and the birds should be broken, and no one.
And no, you're absolutely right too, because depending on what factions are in play, completely changes how you would play your faction. If we ever played with the lizard folk, but these guys weren't in the game, and we had like 2 vagabonds, like your whole strategy of buying cards off the lizard folk would be shot
completely.
And so it's not just a matter of like learning your faction and mastering your faction, but it's mastering a faction with the variability in the game constantly. And so you're absolutely right. It's if you like games that take a while to master, this is that kind of game.
I also think for the lasting effect for this game, for replayability, it depends on who you're playing with as well. You have to be able to play with people that are okay with conflict, that are okay with personal interactions, because this isn't a Euro game where you're doing your own thing. And you know,
it's a Euro game. There's little wooden pieces.
That's true, but they're not cubes, so.
But they're meeples.
So you can do your own thing, but you have to rely on interactions to win, and you have to have some conflict. You know, there's going to be some battle. There's going to be some sort of, you know, wrench thrown into
unless you're the vagabond and none of your cohorts have crafted any swords.
So you have to be okay with that. And if you're playing with people who love those types of things, like you guys do, me not so much. But it's such an experience, and every time you play it, it's so different because people are just trying to, it's like, I don't care about winning now. I'm just disrupting this stuff, and it just makes it more interesting for everyone else. So if you're a bunch of Euro players, you know, that just want to do your own thing, I could see you getting bored with this.
I don't know if I see you getting bored with it, but
because you're trying to do your own
instantly
thing,
disliking it and being like, I don't like this mechanic. I'm not going to play this game anymore.
If you don't like contention, and I'm not saying you have to get upset or angry at a game, but if you don't like that confrontation in a game of like, I'm going to do this.
Well, you're doing a whole thing, and then someone comes in and just ruins it. You kind of have to be okay with that and realize, all right, now I need to go do this and change a strategy. Whereas you can't be like, this is my one thing I'm going to do to win the game and then do it. Well, it's like you have to change all the time. You have to be okay with just starting over.
And the scoring.
And
I mean, the scoring is you're going to score points and you are going to get torn down.
Yeah.
Like, it's going to happen.
So every time we've played, especially when you're playing with 6 people, I mean, one person will take their turn and then they'll score a bunch of points on their turn. And everyone will be like, we got to stop that guy. And by the time it gets back around to you, you might have next to no pieces on the board at all. And that can happen
only
with
ever have one.
The birds or the otters.
That's what happens with the lizard folk. When I said you put out a bunch of gardens, you score, those gardens are going to be gone, which means not only are they gone, you also lose cards. So anytime someone takes a garden off, you lose a card. That alters everything.
Another interesting twist on the game too is, so like the birds, with the way that their programming and everything works, if you have a couple of savvy players, they could basically crush the birds right out of the gate, force them to go into turmoil almost every turn if they know what they're doing. Because if you sit there and you look and you're like, okay, he has to recruit in a fox clearing on his next turn, and he's got like 1 fox clearing, you go in and you take it, you basically force that player to go into turmoil. And so you can...
But I'm not sure, and I still want to play with them more. I've played with them a number of times, but I haven't quite put my finger on how often you want turmoil.
Well, and another interesting thing is you can do that and virtually take the birds out of the equation, but if you do that, some other faction that the birds are meant to keep in check will just take over. And so it's a balance between, I could totally wreck that player, but do I want to totally wreck that player? Because that guy, I mean, the birds and the cats keep each other in check like the whole game. And so if you knock one of them out, the other one can just steamroll everyone else.
But see, the birds, I want to play the birds with the river folk. Oddly enough, I haven't played both of those in the same game. Because you have the mercenaries, the birds could just put nests everywhere. Like, okay, because the more spread out that you are as a river folk, the more I am as a bird.
See, and what's interesting is the birds with the river folk and the cats is a completely different game from the birds with the Woodland Alliance and 2 vagabonds. Like,
yeah,
your strategy's completely different every game.
Yeah. And also, let's not forget the back side of the board is winter and has variable what forest is where.
The clearings are all random on the back
they
side.
change
And the river
during
is
each game,
different too.
Yeah. So obviously, you guys can tell that we like this game. I wanted to ask you, is there anything that you guys dislike? And there's one thing that I know I'm not a big fan of. It's not that big of a deal either. So it's almost nitpicky, but I am actually not a fan of the clearing colors. They all have their little symbols too, but if you're not careful and paying attention to what you're doing, you could easily mistake especially the two oranges.
Orange and red are very similar.
Very close to each other.
I played the game twice before I realized that the colors of the trees corresponded to the colors.
Symbols.
See, and I don't look at the colors still. I like looking at the emblems, but I think
it would help
just,
if you remembered that, though.
Yeah. And I mean that's honest, and it's a minor gripe. You get over it, but I think there's been a couple times where I'm like, oh, I'm in the right clearing, and I look again, I'm like, crap, this is not the right one. I need to be in like the mouse one instead of the fox.
Yeah,
I can see that
on that. But is there anything like along those lines other than you guys getting incredibly salty?
I mean, so
I'm curious to see what happened in all the testing, because early product has the scoring track at 40. So I've always kind of been curious what shifted through playtesting to move it to 30. I like 30. I think it is the sweet spot. I'm just curious what
I'm wondering,
kind of went
I'm
there.
thinking it
to
might
get
be
it.
a time
length
thing.
of game. Yeah.
Because I mean, with the 6-player game, that's what is it? 2-3 hours?
I don't
couple
know, but it's so weird though because it's long, but it seems like
with
feel like a
experienced
long game.
players, I don't think you would have 3-hour games. 2 hours maybe, but not 3 hours. But
so little turns.
It could have been
like it's
balanced,
really
too.
weird.
Yeah,
like you'll
it
be
is-
a long time into the
like
game, and it's like,
maybe
oh, this is my
6
third
or
turn.
7 turns a piece, and it doesn't feel like it because there's so much going on, and the board is changing constantly. But it's really only like 6.
And you've got to
7 turns
remember
a
that, right?
piece.
With these slow, some of them that are spreading, you've got to really kind of know how that goes, and some of them are a slow burn.
And that's actually one of the things that I don't know if I disliked it, but it was kind of hard where some of them are kind of slow. So I feel like other people are doing all of these things, and I'm like, and I put this out. That's my turn. Sometimes it's just like a little too slow. And I'm like, I wish I could do more on my turn. And then, especially in the 6-player games, like, all right, I'll hop on my phone now for
Zach,
10 minutes until it
don't
comes
play the
back
vagabond.
again.
Don't play the vagabond.
Downtime.
But it
can be a little
depends
bit.
because you play something else and you are one of those doing a lot of things, and maybe they do less on some other turns that you don't realize, and you gear up for those big turns later on, and it kind of evens out. But sometimes it does feel like you have short, small turns that feel not super fun.
That's why I love playing as the river folk, because I never feel like
You're
I have
always
short turns
involved.
because I'm always like, on every person's turn, I'm like, before you do anything, if you want to buy anything, you have to do it now. So you always remind people, and everybody's turn kind of feels like it's
But
part
you
of
have
your
to pay
turn.
attention as well, because I mean, if you just hop on your phone and you don't pay attention, you like look at the board, you're like, oh, whoa, what happened?
You'll be like, let me notice my turn again. You look back and you're like,
You took out all my
everything
guys.
changed colors. All the cats turned into birds.
And if there's conflict and there's battles and things like that, you will be more engaged. But some of them battle more than others. It seems like.
Yeah.
Yeah. So how do you actually feel about this battle system where you're just rolling to?
I actually kind of like it. 'cause
I
it's
like
really
it.
simple.
Yeah, it feels like
It's not the
It
main
could've-
part of the game. Which
it
I
could have
like.
been more complicated in a game that already feels complicated enough. And this, to me, feels like the simplest thing about the game, and I really like that.
Which is really weird because it feels like a battle game, feels like territory control, but
totally
it's
is
really
for some
not,
of the
and some
factions.
factions are not. Like this game, if you have someone that likes mechs and minions, right? All right, you're going to be the Bird Dynasty. It's basically playing the same thing, right? You're programming. Oh, you like building civilization, territory control. You're good for the cats. So you have like this. You like playing Cthulhu Wars. Oh, great! The Lizard Cult's going to be perfect for you. So it's kind of weird that way, and it's like the Vagabond. You can't call it a territory control game because if you're the Vagabond, you're not even. You got one.
Couldn't care less about who owns what territory,
I know,
really.
like, I think I've battled like once, maybe
You don't
twice
do it
in all
right,
our
though.
playthroughs.
See, and this is the thing. Like we've played
But
so many
there's
times.
six- like
Kevin has
six
played
vagabonds.
Kevin has played the vagabond so many times, and every time I'm like, he's not playing it right. You're not playing the lizards right.
But
you're
there's
not playing the
so-
mice right. Nobody's playing
There's
any of the
6
things right.
different vagabonds.
I know.
So you could be a scoundrel. You could be the tinker. You could be a thief. You could be. It's just.
Yeah, some of
there's-
them are more combat heavy. Some of them aren't.
And that's where I said, if you were into Discovery, you're going to get 5, 6 good plays out of this where you're just, whoa, this is really cool. But I think it's a long-term mastery game where there's a lot of strategy, right? If the more that you and I play the same factions, it's altered every game.
Yeah, it's kind of like the game of Go, where it's fairly easy to learn, but to master it could take years.
Well, a lot of this is you have to know how to do it socially. Like if you're the river folk, you need to be able to market yourself and be like, come buy these things.
It's totally like, you have to be good at
like
table
there's a lot
talk,
of diplomacy
which is-
too.
Yeah.
Oh, the
Because one
lawyer
of the
really good
keys-
at trying to persuade people.
I cannot stand table talk in games like Risk or whatever, and so I kind of struggle with it a little bit. But it's kind of like, look, man, I got some good stuff here. Do you want them or do you not?
Absolutely.
And if not, then that guy's gonna buy. Like you have to pit people against each
But
other.
at the same time,
if you don't buy
you don't
it,
wanna
he will anyway.
get a lot
and you'll get
of,
wiped out. So fine.
But see, that fits a niche for some players.
It does.
So
It does. It's
I
really
feel like
interesting.
a game like Root gives you all of that together, which can feel like a jumbled mess if you try to explain it. But once it plays and people figure it out, it's just awesome. If something feels outbalanced in your game, like if a faction feels outbalanced, the reality of it is, I don't think it's the game, it's the play, and it's how everybody lets somebody. And players might not want to hear that, but
The very first time I played this game was with Russ's nephew, and I was like, the cats are broke. They are so broken. I was so salty about how they worked. And then, later played with the lizard folk. I'm like, they are so broken, so broken. And everyone, I think you kind of go through that every time when you start seeing the different strengths of the faction.
Yeah,
Have
I
you
think
guys seen,
early
have you
on-
guys seen any win like no one's really been dominant?
Yeah, it's never
We've
been like
seen
a runaway
almost
win.
all of them.
no, I will say this based on just, I think when the game is simple, I think it's a lot easier early plays to win with the cats and the birds.
For lower
But once
player
people
count.
once people figure out the more complex factions, I think it's harder to win with the easy factions.
I think it kind of depends. Like the birds to me don't even seem like an easy faction at all. The thought of programming,
programming is not your forte
that
at
makes
all.
me so
Yeah.
anxious. I'm like, I don't want to. I don't want to be forced to do stuff. I want to do whatever
It's
I want.
hard programming, because you have to be able to do stuff or you go in turmoil.
Yeah. In the different games
people-
that I've
you're going
seen played,
against
I've seen the
conflict,
lizard
too.
folk win, the river folk, the cats, and the mice have all won set. Like no one faction has won more than one game.
Sounds like
That I've
Vagabond's the
played.
only one that hasn't won.
Yeah, that's
actually.
because the Vagabond is just a bad faction.
Oh, just
Yeah,
you
no,
watch. Just
you just
watch.
need to show us how
You
it's
were
played
close,
then,
though.
right?
Yeah, I was close. I was
Yeah.
like
Oh,
at
no, yeah.
28.
Yeah.
So,
For sure.
all right. So for while we wrap up, because as you guys can see, we like this game, but I don't want this to be a 2-hour episode. Over your overall final thoughts and impressions of Root.
I think it appeals to a very particular audience. I think, like we've already said, you need to be comfortable with conflict, and you need to be prepared to learn a lot. You have to learn all the nuances of the game before you really start to enjoy the game, I think. You enjoy it at larger player counts. You can play with the birds and the cats, a 2-player game, and really enjoy the game, I think, on your first play. But you need to play it a lot to really enjoy the different factions and the different nuances between them. But I love it. I mean, it's my kind of game. It's got conflict. It's got huge variability, huge replayability. And aside from how salty it makes me, I like everything
If
else.
only if it was in space, right?
Yeah, I know, right? We can
That
just
would be awesome.
in space. These can be planets instead of
Root in space.
clearings. Yeah.
I think it's really awesome, just art wise too. I mean, you've got it's just the lettering, the little animals, the art of it is just really fun and exciting. And I mean, for replayability, I've played only 2 of the factions, and so I have at least all the others to try and learn how to do, and then you just go back and play the other one. So I think it's really fun to not only learn them, because now that I kind of know some of them, it's like, oh, I want to try that one. Now I want to try that one. So it's very intriguing. So once you play it, it kind of gets a little addicting. And I don't know, it might go on for a long time, but I've really enjoyed it so far.
Zach's gonna be one more hit. Come on, just one more character. Come on.
I love the game. There are times that I've wanted to get it to the table on our game nights, but haven't, based on mood around the table. Now that's not to say everyone was in a bad mood, but if you're on edge, like, you don't want to go from
if you're having
Chaos
a bad day,
in the
you don't
old
want
world to Root to Bloodborne, right? Because that's just gonna set everything.
Your brain
off.
to be fried.
But I will say, this is the first game I decided to try to get a solo play in, which has led to more solo plays, which has led to me trying some other games solo. So I actually love this game. I think it's a great solo game, pretty quick setup, sweet play. And then just I love Cthulhu stuff, so actually having the lizard cult in here probably added some to it, because it feels like Lovecraftian to me almost, with the whole cultist and the take possession. And so adding that to this, I don't know how much I would love it without the expansion. I would still like it, but the River Folk and the Lizard Cult take it to a new level for me.
Yeah, I feel like Russ is secretly telling us that he's gonna stop being friends with us with solo play and join a cult.
Yeah.
He's
gonna drink the Kool-Aid.
Drink the Kool-Aid. All right, guys. Thank you so much for talking about Root. We want to hear from you guys. What do you guys think about Root? Or if you have any questions, like I said, this is a very complicated game, so it's probably not the best introduction to a new gamer.
And the how to play was actually, there are much deeper nuances with each of the factions that we didn't go over in every single, that we didn't go over in super detail. So I mean, but it should give you enough to know whether or not you'll like the game.
Yeah, so we want to hear from you guys. So leave a comment below if you guys are on YouTube, or shoot us an email, theplaythru@ktdata.net, or on our Facebook page, facebook.com/theplaythru. Guys, thank you so much, and we hope you guys enjoyed this episode of The Playthru, and we'll see you all next time.